saying it isn't a tutorial, it's really your workflow. Yeah, like whatever, we get it. What's up, fam? It's your boy Demuir here, purveyor of all sounds underground. Thank you for joining me on my YouTube channel today and in 2024. We're finally getting into things with Serato Sample 2.0. I waited a little bit for this and I'll get into some of the reasons why, but I'm excited to share with you how I actually use the product. I know some of you got a little upset in my last video about Serato Sample, saying it isn't a tutorial, it's really your workflow. Yeah, like whatever, we get it. It's my workflow, and I'm just gonna show you how I use the product in my productions. But before we get into things, what I need from you is that SLC. Hit subscribe, like, comment, and more importantly, hit the notifications bell to stay in touch with the new videos we got up and coming each and every time. And if you're dying for more content like I know you are, don't hesitate to join my Patreon for absolutely nothing. It's completely free, and if you want to get more intense exclusive content, you can pay for that. But check it out, patreon.com/Demuir official. Okay, so let's jump right into things. First and foremost, what is new about Serato Sample 2.0? Aside from the bug fixes and something I don't think that gets talked about a lot, because it's just my experience and what I've seen online, are the Mac Silicon specific issues, namely like with some simple things like drag and drop. I had a number of very responsive Twitter exchanges with the makers of Serato, and I was very pleased at that. And I'm happy to say that that's all gone. Drag and drop functionality works very well in terms of putting files into the product itself here directly from my DAW or outside of the DAW. It works genius. So thank you for addressing those. And I also used to have to run it in Rosetta quite a bit. Notice a lot of CPU spikes, which aren't happening as much anymore. And I actually think some other products, because I'm on a Mac Studio, which is featuring the M1 Max Pro chip, and I think a number of manufacturers just haven't caught up to it yet. So there's a couple of times where I noticed spikes, but it's not as bad as what I've seen before with Serato Sample 2.0, where I actually had to run the thing in Rosetta. And of course, the star of the show is the stem isolation. So if we look at my screen here, this product, I'm so glad that Serato did this. You can isolate a cappella, like vocals, melodies, keys, guitars, bass frequencies, as well as the drums. Drums are quite clean. Now, I will say, I did attempt to use Serato Studio before for my workflow, before they put this forward, and I imagine Serato, they received the feedback from a number of different people like myself who loved the technology that was being offered in Serato Studio, but it just was so far out of my workflow I couldn't get into it. So putting it into Serato Sample is genius. I'm relieved that they did this. I've been with the Serato Sample crew as a beta tester way back from the first introduction, and it's just remained a staple in my workflow. So those are the key things that are new with the product. All right, so point number 2, let's talk about what I like. And I think the best way to do this is to demonstrate it on an actual track I've used. I haven't put this track out yet. It's called Derek Scat, in homage to my homeboy Derek Carter. Bit of a quick one, but let's just, I think the best thing to do is let's solo this out. I'm going to just play the sample without any sort of isolation going on, just so you could see the power of why I like this thing so much. So let's just play the sample up to a certain point. I love this vocal. Crazy. So you can hear there's a lot going on in there. There's not really any bass instruments or drums in there, but there is that crowd thing that was going on. And I was like, man, let me see if I can get something out of Serato Sample, just knowing what they've done with the technology. And I mean, way back in the day, we would have kept that thing, like on my ASR back there, we would have kept the crowd in there and just try to finesse it with some clever EQing to isolate the vocal to where I wanted it. But this is what I got. Let's have a listen. And I just rocked this straight out, you know, like. Let's pay attention to that. So that is the first and foremost thing I love about this. The vocal isolation is quite clean. It still requires some finessing, but it's quite clean in my opinion. All right, so the other powerful thing that I love about this product, it had the crowd in there, and you notice the crowd went out. So, I mean, I was able to just get even more creative with this. So when I put the keys back in there, I guess with the way the algorithm is configured, it's adding or isolating those frequencies where the crowd is and able to distinguish the clear mono signal of the lead vocal. Fascinating stuff. So my whole point about this from a creative perspective is a lot of people will be like, oh, I can't get the vocal, I can't, you know, do some things that I'm hearing in my mind. You absolutely can get close to that. This crowd thing really freaked me out because I was like, wow, like I literally was able to take the crowd out of the mix. So really cool stuff. I love this product for what it is and all of the good creative elements we could get into. I want to show you another side of this, which I think is pretty cool. So the next thing I want to show you that's really cool about this, let's look at the main loop. So again, I'm going to leave all of the elements of what I chopped up in the original sample here, but this is the main loop. So let's look at it. So you can hear like the drums, for example, all hitting in a weird way. Those are all snares. And then there's the bass. What I really wanted was the melody. I was hearing that. I thought the vocal piece was cool, but in relation to the scat loop I had, it just wasn't making any clear sense to me. So this is the other most powerful piece I love about this product, because you can remove the bass and other, you know, key frequencies that are touching, like the drums, for example. You can now say, all right, this is how the phrasing of this is going to be now. So I mean, you get a little bit of that bass in there, but it sounds fine to me. It's not the deep, you know, sub frequencies of the bass that you're getting, and you're getting a groove. Whereas if, you know, if we didn't have this technology and all we had were, you know, convenient little things to do creatively with EQing, it still wouldn't come off right, at least to me, because I'll just be hearing the snare on every beat based on how I chopped it. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that just doesn't sound dope for me for this music. And the vocal is cool too, but as I said, it would conflict with the main scat I already had. But when I'm able to isolate these things and not worry about the time and not worry about other elements in the sample that will give the air a sense of, oh, the timing is weird because the chop is starting on a snare, which is the second beat of the bar, it would confuse people. Whereas I could take all that out and get this. And then it becomes my own thing, right? Super fun. So I can't express how powerful I feel that this technology has taken me personally, creatively, to whole other heights that we only dreamt about back in the day when we had, you know, some of the first samplers like the Akai 950 and, you know, the ASR 10 back there, and you know, the EPS 16 if you want to go even further back. So there are huge creative possibilities here. However, it still requires finessing. All right, so this leads to my next point in terms of it still requires some finesse. And what I mean by this, it's just not a one and done solution. So as great as the product is, I think to get the most out of it creatively and the sound, you will need to do something. So let me just show you, like on this main vocal, some of the things I had to do to get to that. So as I said earlier, I was able to get the crowd signal out. I was able to isolate more effectively this particular scat, and it sounds dope with everything else on it. But I mean, for some of you that are thinking, oh, I got the dope Serato sample, I'm just gonna isolate a vocal or a melody and it's one and done. No, it doesn't work that way, because you have to make sure, for one, things are in key, and the other instruments in the track interact very well with the tool. So you'll see here on this main vocal strip, I got quite a bit going on. It's going through my console 1, and I've done some creative things there just to make sure it was gain staged appropriately. The EQ curve here that I got on it in terms of isolation to further enhance that. Then I've used Soothe 2 to get out any harsh signals in the original sample. And I'm doing some serial compression here. Not really, traditional compression. I got the main sample highlighted there, but on the vocal itself, I'm using the LFO tool to sort of duck it down a little bit, make sure the kick cuts through, and then I've applied track spacer to ensure that it's cutting through the way I liked it. And in this song, I didn't have to get too aggressive with track spacer because the LFO tool did its job, but I still have it on there nonetheless, doing some work to get the vocal to sound in the way that I wanted it to sit well in a mix. So the whole point here being, it's just not a one and done solution, and this applies for, I would say, anything that you're isolating in the technology itself, whether it be keys, drums. Make sure you go in and EQ and finesse it, because the reality is that the sample you're putting into what you're trying to create needs to sit well in the mix, and to get the most out of that sound, you need to address every part of the frequency, make sure it's tuned in key, and all of that stuff to make sure things sound right to the ear effectively. So I mean, as great of a tool as it is, it really, in my opinion, just exacerbates the level of creativity that's already inside of you, or that you're willing to go forward with. And that's the piece where I'm really hoping musically, especially in electronic music, we see some more creative things. And that's why, even more so, it'll just be disappointing if someone just takes something that's already been done and throw some drums on it and say, oh, it's a dope track. Like, Serato Sample, if we just look at this simple example, and this is just a vocal, we haven't even gotten into like crazy samples where you can flip them and do them different ways. Even though my main sample here, I would say, sort of touches on that, I don't think it's like J Dilla level sort of stuff. But I do think with this product, you can get to a level of creativity that helps you realize that level of creativeness and just push boundaries above and beyond what we've been seeing. So it's great, but make sure you tweak the samples to fit the mix of the things that you're working within. Oh, and the other thing I want to add on in terms of just the watch out here, and it's not necessarily negative, it's just something that you should be aware of. So with this new stem technology, I've noticed in terms of the disc utilization that Serato, the product, actually creates separate files for what you chop. And it's important to note that, because your disc utilization will tend to go up in terms of file space. It's very minor, but something to just watch out for, because those little chops can now only be played back through the proprietor application, in this case being Serato Samples. So that's just another piece to look out for in your journey with this tool. All right, so the other things that I liked in terms of the product are the things that they've maintained, and if anything, I've noticed they've done it even better. So things like, the key of the sample, which is very helpful, the BPM in terms of where you want to put it at, or you can hit the sync button here to, get it to match up or sync up with your project. As well, you have the choice of mono and poly sort of triggering. So mono being that only one key can play and no other key can play at the same time, whereas poly allows you to play multiple keys. Depending on what's happening with the project, either one would be suited best for a particular situation. Having that flexibility is amazing. The other thing I liked and noticed that has really improved is the time stretch functionality. So you can see here that I've done some manipulation with each of the chops. Like, yeah, one of the chops, I had to push the timing a bit further just to make sure it stayed on beat, about like 17%. And then you got the key shift here where you can literally go between chops and just shift the key to make it sound the way that you want. So when you have all of these tools in your arsenal, there's just boundless creative opportunity. And let's not forget the fact that you can manipulate, it's pretty straightforward stuff, but you can manipulate the level of a particular chop that you have in there. You can manipulate the filter as well as the attack, which is pretty cool. Like, it helps with, you know, the blending in between chops depending on the situation. And for release 2, you can have a chop continue on, for example, in a poly mode, and it just continue as you hit the next chop, making it sound blended nicely. I didn't need to use that in this project, but it's available along with reverse and favoriting a particular chop as well. Fabulous product. I really can't argue with the things that they provided here, but the fact that they even continue to improve upon what was already in the product is also great as well, and I thought it was worth a mention. All right, so my final point here, the final verdict is this is a great tool, and I welcome you to come back to this video and watch the significance of the whole ability to remove timing as a potential roadblock in getting creative with samples. Once you can remove the drums and you have the bass and the melodies and vocals as well to manipulate and throw into your tracks, it just broadens the creative spectrum in my point of view and allows you to get into things in a way that we couldn't have before. We dreamed about products like this, and I hope you found this helpful. It's absolutely worth every penny. I think it's my understanding, because I'm in a beta group, I received this for free, but I think it's about 150 to 200 US, if I'm not mistaken. I'll make sure I have a link directly to the product for you to pick it up. Serato's not sponsoring me for this video by any means or telling me what to say. I'm just keeping it real with you. And for those of you who've seen my weekly production streams on Patreon, know that it's a staple in my workflow and has been for some time, but now it's at a whole other complete level. So make sure you go out and cop this one. Much love and respect to you. Peace.